The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Plague. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the world's deadliest pandemic. According to Wikipedia, the Black Death, also known as the Great Plague, the Plague, and less commonly, the Black Plague, was the most devastating pandemic in human history, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia, and peaking in Europe from 1347 to 1351. The signs and symptoms of the bubonic plague. Accounts of the plague are often varied or imprecise. The most commonly noted symptom was the appearance of buboes in the groin, the neck, and armpits, which oozed pus and bled when opened. The cause of the Black Death is known as plague theory. Plague theory attributes the outbreak to Yersinia pestis, also responsible for a pandemic that began in southern China in 1865, eventually spreading to India. The investigation of the pathogen that caused the 19th century plague was begun by teams of scientists who visited Hong Kong in 1894, among whom was a French-Swiss bacteriologist, Alexandre Yersin, after whom the pathogen was named. The mechanism of which Y. pestis was usually transmitted was established in 1898 by Paul-Louis Simond and was found to involve the bites of fleas, whose midgets had become obstructed by replicating Y. pestis several days after feeding on an infected host. This blockage results in starvation and aggressive feeding behavior in the fleas, which repeatedly attempt to clear the blockage by regurgitation, resulting in thousands of plague bacteria being flushed into the feeding site, infecting the host. The bubonic plague mechanism was also dependent on two populations of rodents, one resistant to the disease, which acts as a host, keeping the disease endemic, and a second, the lack of resistance. When the second population dies, the fleas move on to other hosts, including people, thus creating a human epidemic. So why exactly did 75 to 200 million people die in the Black Plague? Antibiotics had not yet been invented and would not be invented for quite some time. Proper waste management had yet to come about, and streets of the urban areas were littered with waste. Rodents would be running through the streets, and other infected animals as well. These rodents would carry fleas that would jump onto people, biting them, spreading the infection. In fact, the plague was so infectious that even brushing up against an infected person's clothing would cause that individual to catch the plague as well. Some people would not exhibit symptoms of the Black Death for almost a week, but once those symptoms started, it was surely a death sentence. Plague doctors all around Europe tried to combat the disease through several medical practices, though you could hardly call it medicine. These plague doctors would use sharp instruments to cut into the pores of the people, trying to get the blood flowing, exclaiming that the blood flow is all that we need in order to keep us alive. That's humorous, as some plague doctors would come down with the disease themselves, suffering the same fate to their peers. In fact, plague doctors killed many more people than they should have. Many forms of plague doctors plagued the world at this time of the plague. Over the course of a few years, 25 to 50% of Europe had been wiped out due to the plague. This is the highest count of death that we've seen from one disease in this time period, making it only second to smallpox as the most infectious disease in the world. Though we've eradicated smallpox, we have yet to eradicate the Black Death. Thousands of cases pop up a year of the Black Plague, mainly in Madagascar. At first, the symptoms only look like flu symptoms, so some doctors are unable to identify it in time, allowing those patients death. But once noticed, if in time, it can be treated with antibiotics. A scary thing about the plague is that there is a strain that has been noticed to be resistant to antibiotics. But fortunately for us humans, that strain has no evolutionary advantages because it is not spreading to people as much. Though it is still possible for an outbreak to occur, it is very unlikely. But if it does happen, if an outbreak does occur with this strain that is resistant to antibiotics, it could mean the death of many civilizations. I thank you all for tuning into this video and wish you a wonderful evening. Please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below telling me what you'd like to hear about next or giving me feedback on this video. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.